10, we have Psycho. So who knew that Alfred Hitchcock's thriller Psycho was based on a true story? Creepy! The story of the murderous Norman Bates who killed guests at his motel is rooted in real life. Bates' character was inspired by the Wisconsin murderer Ed Gein, also known as the Mad Butcher. Gein was affected by his mother's death and began to create a woman suit so he could climb in her and become his mother. Too much weird. Similarly, Bates preserves his mother's corpse and regularly becomes her in fits of hysteria.
If you're feeling a bit scared, let's change the subject and talk about dolphins. And at number 9 we have Dolphin Tale. This beloved children's movie directed by Charles Martin Smith came out in 2011, and it's based off the true story of Winter, who's a bottlenose dolphin that was rescued off the Florida coast in December 2005. Winter had lost her tail after being caught in some ropes attached to a crab trap. She was taken in by Clearwater Marine Aquarium. She worked with the aquarium's employees and was rehabilitated and fitted with a prosthetic tail. This movie is very accurate in its reenactments of the events that happened. And the movie went over really well with audiences, and it earned $95.5 million in the box office, off of a $37 million budget. People loved it so much that the team decided to make a sequel, Dolphin Tale 2, which was released back in September 12, 2014.
Yay, that sounds like a really happy story. Dolphins are great. You know what isn't great, however? Getting stuck in a hole. In at number 8, we have 127 Hours. The 2010 movie directed by Danny Boyle and starring James Franco is all about the drama as a guy essentially gets stuck while on a hiking adventure and then, spoiler, has to cut his own arm off to get free. Oh, I'm never gonna be the same again after watching that. The story is very closely based on events experienced in real life by Aaron Ralston. In 2003, Aaron was hiking and canyoning in Utah's Canyonlands National Park when a boulder fell and trapped him in a slot canyon. This is probably one of my worst nightmares. All alone, Aaron films himself while he's stuck to try and lighten the mood. He then tries to chip away at the boulder to no avail. Then his drinking water starts running really low. Eventually he gets desperate and realizes that if he applies a torque, he can amputate his own arm. He then encounters a family as he hikes for 7 hours to find help. All true. Seriously. Danny Boyle worked with Aaron Ralston to retell his story on the big screen. While a couple of small details were changed, Aaron said that the film is so factually accurate, it is as close to a documentary as you can get and still be a drama. What a guy.
Speaking of crazy survival stories, next up we have Soul Surfer coming in at number 7. The 2011 movie starring Anna Sophia Robb is based off of a story that made headlines and shocked people worldwide. This movie is based off the real life events of Bethany Hamilton and her brush with death. Bethany is an American professional surfer who on October 31st, 2003 survived a shark attack in which her left arm was bitten off. At the time she was only 13 years old. So basically it was early in the morning and she headed to the tunnels with her best friend's father and brother. She went out onto the water and was lying on her surfboard, with her left arm dangling in the water. All of a sudden a 14-foot-long shark attacked her, biting off her left arm just below the shoulder. She was rushed to the hospital, but once there she had already lost over 60% of her blood. She spent a week in recovery and was then released. Despite all this trauma, she was determined to return to surfing. And just 1 month after the attack, she was back on her surfboard. All of this is shown in the movie. Bethany wanted the movie to be very true to the events that happened. After the accident, Bethany went to appear on many talk shows, and in 2004 she even won the ESPY Award for the Best Comeback Athlete. And in 2004 she wrote the book Soul Surfer, which the movie is based off of.
What an inspiring tale. So from sharks in the water to sharks in the medical profession, at number 6 we have Dallas Buyers Club. The Academy Award winning Dallas Buyers Club is largely credited with being a consolidator in the McConaissance, aka the rebirth of leading actor Matthew McConaughey. McConaughey plays Ron Woodruff, an electrician and rodeo cowboy who is diagnosed with HIV. Ron eventually fights the Food and Drug Association for better drugs to help fight HIV, finding a better and healthier alternative that is not yet approved in the US. Eventually Ron sets up the Dallas Buyers Club to illegally sell the new drug to those suffering with AIDS and HIV. So all of the above is taken from the real life story of Ron Woodruff. The only things that are heavily fabricated in the film are the characters of Rayon and Dr. Eve Sachs, who are created for drama purposes.
From one movie starring Matthew McConaughey, we have another movie that he featured in. And at number 5 we have Wolf of Wall Street. This 2013 movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Matthew McConaughey, and Margot Robbie body is a pretty fair depiction of the real life events that took place in Jordan Belfort's life. In this movie, we have Belfort in his early 20s and he takes an entry-level position at a Wall Street brokerage firm. Shortly after, he ends up owning his own firm, and he makes a huge fortune by defrauding wealthy investors out of millions of dollars. He has a crazy life made up of drugs, sex, and alcohol, and all the while, the FBI are closing in on taking him down. There's some crazy scenes in this movie that, believe it or not, are real. For example, Belfort did abuse and other drugs. He did almost crash a helicopter into his yard while he was high on Quaaludes, as well as crashing his Lamborghini while he was on the same drug. His yacht did sink in a Mediterranean storm, and he did strike his wife. After all of this, in 1999, Belfort pleaded guilty to securities fraud and money laundering. He was sentenced in 2003 to 4 years in prison, but only served 22 months. He published his first memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street, in 2008, which is what this movie is based off of. He actually even appeared in the movie. At the end, he's the person who introduces Leo's character onto the stage at the Straight Line seminar. And nowadays, Belfort is a motivational speaker.
To be honest, I would definitely go to one of Geordie Belfort's talks because, you know, all that Matthew McConaughey stuff. He's an empowering man. Leo everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Leo for King. Next up, a movie that finally got him his Oscar. At number 4, we have The Revenant. Academy Award winning The Revenant was all anybody could talk about when the film came out at the very end of 2015. Leonardo DiCaprio made headlines as he slept in an animal carcass and ate raw bison liver, and, along with the film crew, filmed in temperatures of -25°C and below. Whoa! Talk about suffering for your art. Surely scenarios this extreme couldn't have come from real life, but they did. Leonardo plays Henry Glass, a real historic fur trapper alive in the early 19th century. Director and co-screenplay writer Alejandro Inarritu took a few liberties with the story, which was actually way less biographical than some others in this list. That said, Henry Glass did survive a bear attack, and the story between him and John Fitzgerald did largely play out the way described in the movie, although in real life nobody was killed.
From a real life story during which nobody was killed to a real story where actually a whole lot of people were killed, and at number 3 we have Pocahontas. Believe it or not, this beloved 1995 Disney movie is based off of a true story. Pocahontas was actually based off a real Native American woman who was born in 1595. She was given the birth name Matawaka, but Pocahontas was her childhood nickname, which translated into Little Wonton, which meant she was playful and hard to control. Much like the storyline of this movie, Pocahontas was the daughter of the chief, and she's most notable in real life for her association with the colonial settlement in Jamestown in Virginia. Also, she did save Englishman John Smith's life when he was an Indian captive. And much like the movie, she saves him by placing her head on top of his head, while her father rises his club war to execute him. However, according to historical records, these two were not lovers. But her story does continue on, and here are some things that are not shown in the movie. In 1613, Pocahontas was captured by the English, and she was held for ransom. During her captivity, she converted to Christianity, and she was given the name Rebecca. Shortly after, she was given the opportunity to return to her people, but she chose to stay with the English. And then, in April 1614, she married a tobacco planter named John Rolfe, and this couple had a son together who they named Thomas. Then, just a few years later, in 1617, Pocahontas died at the young age of 21 due to unknown causes.
I absolutely loved that movie as a child, although this next one was my absolute favourite. At number 2, we have The Sound of Music. America's much loved 1965 smash hit movie, The Sound of Music, has gone down in the ages as something of an icon. Directed by Robert Weiss and famously starring Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer, the heartfelt tale of a nun working with a widowed man and his family amid World War II in Austria won 4 Academy Awards. It is true that millions of people love the story of the Von Trapps, but many do not know the film is based on a real story. The story of the real Von Trapps. Georg von Trapp really was a naval officer opposed to the Nazis. Maria really was a nun who came to work with the family after Georg's wife died. The pair really did get married, the family really did sing together, and they did really escape Italy. However, they did not climb over the Alps, but instead they just boarded a train, which makes a lot of sense really. There are are many differences to the family's true story to that depicted in the film. For example, in real life, Georg and Maria married for convenience rather than love. But Hollywood knows what the people want to hear, and also, Maria did say in real life that she learned to love him. We just didn't have that time in the movie.
So I must say, like Rebecca, Sound of Music is one of my favorite movies too. It is just such a good story. Okay, so we've reached that all-important moment in our most amazing top 10 movies based on real events. And at number 1, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is one of the most popular and scary horror movies out there. What makes it even creepier is that it's based off of a true story. This movie has a total of 6 different remakes. The oldest one, the original, dating back to 1974, and then the newest one being 2013, which also just so happens to be in 3D because, you know, apparently someone going around killing people with a chainsaw was starting to lose its scare factor. In this movie, we follow 2 teenage siblings and 3 of their friends who go to visit their grandfather's grave. They pick up a creepy hitchhiker who ends up killing himself and one of their friends, and then they end up at a home of a murderous family. This movie is made up of a leather-faced, chainsaw-wielding maniac, a grave-robbing brother, and a chef father. And let's not forget their decaying grandfather. This movie has been depicted as being inspired by a true story. However, it's actually only lightly based off of the real-life murderer Ed Gein, who was suspected of taking many lives between 1954 and 1957. One huge difference is that Ed didn't use a chainsaw to kill his victims. He actually used a pistol. However, one huge similarity is that Ed did wear a human scalp and face when he would go out and kill. I wish this could have been the part that wasn't true because it's so freaky. However, unlike the movie, Ed did not wear the human flesh because of a skin condition, but rather he had a desire to be a woman. He even wore a vest of skin that included breasts, and he would strap female genitalia above his own. So safe to say the true story was actually creepier than the movie. Didn't think that was possible.
Now, we all enjoy a good scary movie. Well, at least I do. However, when a horror movie ends saying based on a true story, I know I'm not the only one that gets a little freaked out by that. It's just so much more terrifying knowing that what I just watched actually happened in real life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host, Lindsay Ivan, or the new girl, as people often refer to me as in the comments. How are you all doing today? I'm great, thanks for asking. I know, you probably didn't care, but I'm doing great. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 real scary stories that should be turned into movies. And seriously, there are some really good ones here. Now, if any of you decide to use my ideas and turn them into movies, please hire me as an actor in the film, and also credit me with supplying you with the idea. Thank you, it's appreciated. Starting off with number 10, The House with the Animals in the Walls. That literally sounds like a name of a horror movie that already exists. In 2015, the Bretzuis family was renovating their home and was planning on re-insulating their house. However, when they tore open the walls, they discovered it was lined with bodies of dead animals. These animals were wrapped in newspaper from the 1930s and 40s. Along with these animals, there were spices, artifacts, and other miscellaneous items in the wall. Apparently, all these items can be linked to powwow or Dutch magic, which is used to treat ailments or gain protection. Some of the items in the wall were linked to spells that promote the care of livestock, treatments for illnesses, and even used to conjure demons. They were living with these animals in the walls for several years, which in turn caused some of the family members to become ill and caused a constant odor in the house. Now, let me paint you a picture of the movie I'm imagining. Family moves into a house, maybe it was cheap real estate, but as they are living there, strange things start to occur, including them hearing scratching from inside the walls and seeing apparitions of demons. Eventually, they tear open the walls to investigate and find the animals, but also unleash some of the dark magic that was used in the time. I think I deserve an Oscar already. Moving on to number 9, we have the Tylenol killer. Tylenol is supposed to help you with pain, not cause you any. Well, in 1982, a number of deaths occurred due to someone lacing the drug with cyanide. Now, this was back in the day when drugs like these didn't come with a proper seal. There would just be a cotton ball shoved inside. Mary Kellerman was the first victim and died shortly after taking the pill. After that, 3 members of the Janus family all passed away after taking a Tylenol. More individuals continued to pass on unexplainably until a nurse discovered that it was from the tampered Tylenol. In fact, the pills were so strong that one capsule could have killed thousands. After investigating, they found that multiple Tylenol bottles were contaminated from different stores around Chicago. Now, officers believe that this was the works of Ted Kaczynski. He was a mathematical genius, but gave up that career and started to live a more darker life. He already has been convicted of 3 counts of murder. However, there is still no solid evidence pinning him to being the poisoner. Next, we have the witch elm tree at number 8. In 1943, 4 boys in Stourbridge, England located something odd in an old witch elm tree. Upon climbing up and looking in the tree, one boy discovered that a decomposed body of a young woman was stuffed inside. A gold wedding ring was on her left hand, while her right hand was sawed off. The hand was later discovered buried just below the tree. This woman was apparently 35 years of age and had apparently been in the tree for 18 months. Now, when this body was discovered, no one knew who it belonged to. That was until graffiti started appearing all around town. The graffiti wrote, "Who put Lubella down the witch elm?" This appeared on a wall in Old Hill. Then in Birmingham, another message appeared. Then another message at Witchbury Hill that read, "Who put Bella in the witch elm?" No one knows who was writing these messages, but it was assumed that they knew the victim as they identified her by her name. This message kept appearing all throughout England and Europe. Over time, police began to lose evidence and even misplaced her body. The case has never been solved, but the graffiti can still be found on some alleyways. At number 7, we have The Voices. Now, this woman was using a sleep app that basically runs all throughout the night and starts recording when it detects noise. In the morning, she was going through the recording when she could hear a voice talking. In the recording, you can hear a bunch of clicks that sound almost like footsteps, and then you can hear the woman say, "What are you doing?" That's in fact her own voice, but she doesn't remember saying that at all. What's even creepier is after that you hear the ghostly voice say, "Nothing." Like, they actually say the word nothing, they don't say nothing. And then you hear what sounds like either, "Oh, be still," or "That's them." Either way, it is terrifying, and throughout the recording the weird clicking noise is present. Now, she said that she eventually moved from that house and everything was fine, until her son started talking about seeing a dark figure with no face. Her son also kept asking where Ho was. She thinks that it's a spirit that he was seeing, that apparently followed them to their new house. I think this would make a good movie. Just imagine a woman starts using this app to monitor her sleep talking patterns when she discovers she's not the only one in the house. Dun dun dun. In our 6th spot, we have Hotel Monte Vista. The Monte Vista Hotel in Flagstaff, Arizona is known to be home to multiple paranormal entities. The hotel opened in 1927 and people have seen several ghosts, including a ghost of a bellboy, bank robber, and even a dancing couple. If you stay in room 220, then apparently the TV will change channels on its own. Even some people have felt cold hands touching them while they sleep. Now, the ghost of the bellboy will apparently knock on the door and even say room service, but will not be there when anyone checks. He could at least leave some food or something for them. Some guests have seen him outside of room 210 and described him dressed in an old-fashioned uniform with brass buttons. Now, in 1970, 3 men robbed a bank near the hotel, and afterwards they celebrated their robbery at the bar in the hotel. However, one robber was shot and bled to death in the hotel. People say that they see bar stools and drinks moving on their own. It is also said that 2 women were murdered in room 306 in the 1940s, and during the night they will place a hand over the guests' mouths and throats, making them wake up and not being able to breathe. They mainly target male guests, that's because they were murdered by male individuals. There's also a little boy that roams the hotel, and even a chair that rocks by itself in room 305, sounds of baby crying in the basement, and a dancing ghost couple. And the list continues. From its creepy history to the countless ghosts that roam the hall, this hotel would be a great basis for a movie. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Smiley Face Killer. The Smiley Face Killer got its name from leaving graffiti smiley faces at the scene of every crime. Now, they have made a documentary on it, but I think it would also make a good horror film. The killing started in 1997 and ended in 2008. Now, all the victims were white college-aged men. All of these victims were drowned and found with a smiley face graffitied nearby. Some people believe that they were murdered out of jealousy from being good looking or good in school or athletic. Now, some of the murders happened on the same night but in different areas, so detectives even believe that it was done by an organization or group of individuals. The cases also have other weird similarities. In 1997, Patrick McNeil was last seen drinking at a Manhattan bar when found drowned in the New York harbor. In 2016, Matthew Genovese was last seen at a pub drinking and was found drowned as well. Both of these victims were drinking prior to their death and also had no signs of foul play. Detectives believe it was just an accidental drowning and coincidence. But there were 45 deaths, all men around the same age, from death by drowning, with a smiley face left at the scene. That's not a coincidence, it's murder. In fourth place, we have the phone stalker. In 2007 in Washington, numerous families reported receiving death threats over the phone. Apparently, the individual on the other end of the line knew way too much about these families and used it to their advantage. Now, some of these threats included the mystery phone person saying that they would kill their children, pets, or other family members. Every time they received a call, it would appear on their phone as restricted. Some families even received recordings of their own private conversations, even one that they had between a police detective. Apparently, the caller knows everything about these families, from what they're wearing, to the conversations that they've had, to where they are. They believe that this caller was using their own cell phones to spy on them, and they managed to do so even when the phone was off. One family by the name of the Q Kendall family even changed all their phones and numbers, and the caller was still able to contact them. This person tormented the family for months. When they got a new security system installed in their house, this caller called them and commented on how they knew their passcode and could enter their house. This continued until one day the torment just stopped. But the caller was never caught. That would definitely make a good stalker movie. This person has some Joe from the Netflix show You vibes, that's for sure. Coming in at number 3, we have the Circleville Writer. In 1976, individuals in Circleville, Ohio started receiving handwritten letters from a mysterious person. Now, similar to the phone stalker case, this anonymous person knew personal details about these individuals. However, there weren't any cell phones that they could use to tap into. Yet they claimed to always be watching these individuals. In one of these letters written to a woman named Mary Gillispie, she was accused of having an affair with the school superintendent. She worked with the school as a school bus driver. Her letter read, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house. I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously." Then Mary's husband Ron received a letter informing him that he would be in danger if he didn't stop the affair. Mary continued to get more letters. Another one read, "Mary, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out." Shortly after, the letters stopped. Until August 17th in 1997, when Ron received a phone call from this writer. As a result, he got in his car with a gun and headed out. He passed away later that day from crashing into a tree, and his gun had been fired. No one knows why or how this happened. The notes continued to terrorize this family all throughout 1983. Some were even addressed to Mary's daughter. The Circleville Writer went to the extreme when one day Mary was driving the bus down the normal route when she saw signs exposing her had been placed throughout the route. When she went to remove them, she saw that it was rigged with a gun. Therefore, if she would have gotten rid of the sign in a certain way, the gun would have gone off and killed her. Now, this gun was linked to her former brother-in-law, Paul Fresher. Paul claimed he was innocent, but was still sentenced to 7 to 25 years in jail. However, he was not the Circleville letter writer. And in fact, he started to receive notes too while in jail. One letter wrote, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of here? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" So he was set up by the Circleville Writer. To this day, no one knows who the writer was. Now, when I was reading about this, I thought it would make a great film about a man who targets people who have sinned and forces them into confessing, or else he kills them. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's already been made, but I mean, it's a pretty solid idea in my opinion. In our number 1 spot, we have the death of Eliza Lamb. Now, this is a truly scary story enough on its own. Eliza Lamb was on vacation staying at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This 21-year-old Canadian was traveling by herself, journaling about her travels along the way. On January 31st, that was the last time she had been seen. Now, the only lead that we have is from the elevator's surveillance footage. This shows her final moments before her disappearance. Now, this footage is quite disturbing. She is seen behaving out of character. She is talking to herself, moving her hands randomly, pressing random elevator buttons, opening and closing the elevator doors, and peering around the elevator corner. A few days later, hotel guests reported the water in their hotel rooms was running black, and they claimed that the tap water was tasting weird. On February 19th, Eliza's body was found rotting and bare in the water tank on the hotel's roof. Her death was labeled as accidental drowning, but everyone believes otherwise. Now, in order for Eliza to have gotten into the water tank, she would have had to gone up to the 15th floor, taken a staircase up to the roof, and turned off the roof alarm. From there, she would have had to climb onto the platform where the hotel's water tanks are, and then up another ladder to get to the tank that she was found in. Now, how did she do this undetected? Especially since the roof has an alarm system and was locked. As a result, people believe that she was possessed or that she was playing the elevator game. The elevator game is said to be the world's most dangerous game. Basically, you have to be in an elevator that has at least 10 floors. When you're in the elevator, you have to press the floor buttons in a specific order. After doing so, you press the 5th floor and a woman will enter the elevator with you. This woman is not alive and it is deadly if you look or talk to her. Then you are supposed to go to the 10th floor, which brings you to another dimension. Sounds like a pretty terrifying horror movie to me. Let me add that this story took place in the Cecil Hotel, which has a grim past already. Richard Ramirez committed 14 murders and lived on the 14th floor in 1985. Jack Unterweger was another killer that stayed in the hotel, and in 1962, a female host guest jumped out of the hotel's window to her death. So yeah, this hotel alone is a good place to base a movie off of. There's just so much in the history. Starting off at number 10, we have The Exorcism. Now, I know that there are tons of exorcism movies out there, but this next one, it needs to be made into a movie for sure. Let me explain. So, a family in North London claimed that their 26-year-old son was a victim of possession. In August of 2016, they claimed that their son Kennedy Ife started to act more violent. He would say that a snake was living inside of him. He bit his father and he threatened to harm himself. This is when they restrained him to his bed. They then proceeded to conduct an exorcism on Kennedy. The family was very convinced that a demon was inside of Kennedy, and that's what Kennedy referred to as the snake in his body. They left Kennedy strapped to the bed for 3 days without any medical attention. For those 3 days, they would just pray continuously. However, this sadly didn't work. He ended up developing breathing issues and passed away. When police arrived, they found that the family had tried to resurrect Kennedy from the dead. All 7 members of the Ives family were convicted of manslaughter and false imprisonment. However, they were all cleared of charges in March of 2019. So was Kennedy really possessed, or did the family just make that up? Because then they also tried to resurrect him, which I mean, it's not typically a normal thing to do. But imagine that as a movie. I'd watch it. It's a pretty interesting story for me. Also, if he was possessed, where did the demon go? Like, who's its new host? Because if a host dies, it doesn't necessarily mean that the demon will too. Maybe that could be explored in the movie adaptation. Moving on, at number 9, we have Rig 12. Now, this next story comes from the perspective of a paramedic who was an ambulance driver. It's from the Reddit user Zerbo. Well, they have stated that a lot of paramedics have had a spooky encounter with a haunted ambulance. Maybe it's from somebody who passed away in the back. They don't know. But it's always in the ambulance known as Rig 12. So it was 3 AM, which, bad start already, that's the witching hour. Anyways, him and his partner were both waiting in their ambulance in a small community. That's when they heard a man say, "Oh my god, am I dying?" Then they heard heavy breathing. After that, they heard the oxygen bottle hiss, as if air was being seeped out to help him with his heavy breathing. They thought for sure somebody was in the back of the ambulance. But when they went to investigate, there was nothing there. The oxygen bottle wasn't even touched. Okay, so like a film about a haunted ambulance sounds kinda lame, but imagine a film about the patients that died in the vehicle that keep reliving their deaths and haunting the paramedics. Like, come on, it's not a bad idea. Maybe it's not Oscar worthy, but there's definitely some potential with this concept. In our 8th spot, we have Stalker Mom. Now, this story is all about a mom named Karen and her stalking store managers. It would make a pretty good comedy movie. This story was posted from the Reddit user LazyDaisy6702. In September of 2018, when this Reddit user was 16 years old, she went to a new high school and didn't have any friends in the area. That's when she was introduced to a woman named Kat. Now, Kat was 27 years old and they still became good and fast friends despite the age difference. They would see each other fairly often and just hang out. Then it got to a point where Kat would want her to stay over 2 or more times a week. She would call her every other day and sometimes even call 13 times a day. Kat also gave her a necklace saying "I love you to the moon and back" and had a heart attached that said daughter. So she would joke saying that she was like her adopted mom. Then it started getting more darker. At one point, this Reddit user and Kat weren't seeing each other that often. As a result, Kat had a breakdown and tried to kill her other friend. Kat then blamed this user for her own actions. Kat was becoming way too obsessed with her. She even went to her boyfriend and said, "You're stealing her away from me." Thankfully, this girl blocked her and they've never had an issue since. Now, this story sounds a lot like the movie The Roommate, but I think that the same director should make a sequel and have it about Kat, and maybe how she likes to befriend younger girls. Maybe she can't have kids of her own, so she likes to play pretend with other girls. Next up at number 7, we have The Watcher. Imagine buying $1 million home only to find out that it was being stalked by a mystery man. Because that's what happened to the next family. They bought a $1.3 million home and claimed it was their perfect dream home, minus the creepy stalker part. Now, while living at this home, they received several letters from someone who claimed to be watching the home. Some things that the Watcher said in the letters were, "This home has been the subject of my family for decades." Now, I'm personally gonna try and decipher this as we go. So, Detective Lindsay on the case. So, I believe this means that his family has some weird tradition of watching over this house, like observing the families and such. "I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming." I don't know what that means. I don't think he means it in like a biblical way. And then another letter referred to the new owner's children and asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? And they never did tear open the walls. I'm curious to know what's in them. Come on people, do some investigating. Anyways, this family ended up moving out of this home and the previous owners admitted that they too were being watched. I could honestly see this being made into a really good thriller mystery. I'm personally already invested in this case. I wish I knew why they were watching this house in particular. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Moving on, at number 6 we have The Attic. This next story is from the Reddit user Digsdaws. He claims that his 1-bedroom apartment in Melbourne is haunted. It first started when he came home one day and found the wooden plank that was patching a hole in the ceiling on the ground snapped in two. Above the hole led to a small attic space. Now he claimed that the plank was an inch thick, so it would be hard to break without a decent amount of force applied to it. He thought that maybe someone was in his attic, but that wasn't the case. He called the tenant and she explained that the other 2 renters experienced the same thing. The board was then replaced. A month later, he woke up to a sound of someone being dragged along the floor of the attic. When he went to investigate, he found that the plank was broken in 2 again. He also heard children's voices whispering and heard them say, "It's your turn, it's your turn," over and over again. He was so freaked out that he just went downstairs and he watched some TV. That was until a fuse blew and then his bird started going crazy. He claims that it sounded like his bird was screaming. In the morning, his bird wasn't in his cage. He found him half drowned in the toilet. Thankfully, the bird survived, so don't worry. But when he talked to the landlord about this, she said, "Wow, you heard the whispering too?" Okay. I think landlords need to include that in their listing, like 2-bedroom apartment, nice kitchen, slightly haunted. Like, come on. So, I want to know what happened in that attic space. Clearly something more sinister happened there before he moved in, and I think that's what the movie could focus on. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Hotel Cecil. This hotel is just super cursed. Tons of deaths have occurred in this hotel and it's haunted as a result. So the Hotel Cecil is located in downtown Los Angeles. I suggest not staying there if you are ever visiting. So the first recorded death was in 1931 and it was a suicide. Then all throughout the 30s, 40s, and 60s, there were also similar cases of suicide. They believed that if you stayed at this hotel, then you may be compelled to harm yourself. Then in 1964, a tenant was brutally murdered and the case is still unsolved. Then you have the serial killer Richard Ramirez, who stayed at this hotel. And finally you have Eliza Lamb. We've talked about her a bunch, but she's the Canadian woman who was found dead in the hotel's water tank and no one knows why or how she got there. So yeah, this hotel and its gruesome past would form a great movie premise. Moving on to number 4, we have the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. This is a real unsolved case of the missing woman named Dorothy Jane Scott. Now before Dorothy disappeared, she would receive phone calls from a mysterious caller. The caller would say things like, "When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you." Other times, the caller would profess his love to her. Now, Dorothy did say that she recognized the man's voice, but just couldn't identify who it was. In May of 1980, Dorothy was kidnapped and never seen again. So that night she was at a work meeting. One of her colleagues started to become sick, so she offered to take him to the hospital. When he was released, Dorothy went to her car to bring it to the front of the hospital. The last thing her colleague saw was her car speeding away. They don't know who was driving it. Later, Dorothy's family started to receive phone calls asking if they were related to her, and it would end by saying, "I've got her." They've never found Dorothy or any clues to who this caller may be. Yeah, so they don't know if Dorothy is alive or just being held captive by someone who is obsessed with her. Up next at number 3, we have the case of the men in the lead masks. This next case is so fascinating and mysterious, I actually love it. So in 1966 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 2 electronics repairmen were found dead. What was strange about this is that they were both found wearing business suits, waterproof coats, and lead eye masks. You know, what people wear when they are going to be exposed to radiation. But then why did they only have the eyepieces and not the full mask? I guess that's part of the mystery. Anyways, with them there was a notebook that read 4:30 p.m. be at determined place. 6:30 p.m. swallow capsules. Wait for mask signal. Now there are a bunch of theories about this case. Some hypothesize that they had a plot with a nuclear reactor or were part of a doomsday cult. But the most common theory was that they were trying to contact UFOs. In fact, the area that they were in had been getting a lot of reports of UFO sightings. Now what frustrates me about this case is that there were no toxicology reports done. So we don't even know what capsules they took or if they died from that or something else. Either way, there needs to be a movie done on this. Maybe they were successful and ended up contacting aliens, and they were the ones who killed them after they saw too much. Who knows? Coming in at number 2, we have my own scary story. Now, I get a lot of comments asking me if I believe in ghosts, and honestly, I don't know what to believe. I've only experienced little tiny things that I end up debunking, partially to make me, be able to sleep at night. Alright, so my story. When I was younger, I was a leader for an arts camp. Now this camp took place in an old house. It was a historic site and it was used for camps and other activities. But the camp coordinator always said how it was haunted. He claimed that it was once owned by a man. This man ended up faking a robbery in order to get insurance money. He even went as far as to shoot himself in his own leg to make the scene look more realistic. Sadly, he ended up bleeding to death before the cops arrived. Now, people have seen his apparition all throughout the building. There have even been reports of the alarm system being triggered, but when police arrived, no one is there. This has happened several times, and police have even seen this man's face at the window. Now, when I was a leader there, I would deliberately avoid the basement because that was the most haunted space. In the corner where he passed away, it was much warmer than the rest of the basement. Also, the lights down there were motion activated, and there were times when they would just turn on by themselves. I personally would feel super uneasy going down to that basement. In fact, there was one time where a group of us were down there filming a video, and all of a sudden 2 of the staff just felt something at the exact same time and ran upstairs crying. And lastly, this is the freakiest thing of all. In one of the rooms in the basement, the camp coordinator said that the ghost likes to stay in there. It's a room behind a thick, heavy locked door. When he opened it, there was just a single chair in the middle of the room. This is the spot that he likes to sit. You could knock over that chair or move it, and it would just always end up in the same spot. Now, when I saw that chair, I felt like he was sitting right there watching us. Like, it was a really weird feeling. I just knew he was there. So yeah, a haunted camp, a man who accidentally killed himself to try and take his insurance money, all good basis for a movie plot.